The cold stone floor of the throne room pressed against Selene's knees like a living thing, biting into her skin through the thin shift they'd left her in. Silver chains wrapped her wrists, her ankles, her throat thick, spelled links that burned wherever they touched, sending white-hot pain racing up her nerves in endless waves. Every breath she took felt like swallowing fire. Every heartbeat thudded against the collar, reminding her how close death already was. Rain hammered the high arched windows above, the kind of storm that drowned out screams. Lightning cracked across the black sky, throwing jagged shadows across the marble dais where the Alpha King sat. Kale. His name alone tasted like ash in her mouth. He lounged on the obsidian throne as though the world hadn't just tilted sideways, one leg slung over the armrest, fingers drumming lazily on the carved wolf's head at his side. His dark hair fell across his brow, and his eyes, storm gray, cold as winter steel, barely flicked toward her. She was nothing to him. A nameless omega, they called her. Trespasser. Threat. Disposable. The council stood in a half-circle around the dais, their voices rising like a pack closing in on wounded prey. Elder Vera's thin lips curled as she spoke. The girl was found on sacred ground. The wards were breached. The blood on her hands is proof enough. Selene's hands weren't bloody. They were trembling. The silver had eaten into her palms hours ago, leaving raw, weeping burns that refused to heal. She could feel the heat of her own blood trickling down her fingers, dripping onto the stone in soft, accusing patters. Another elder, Garrick, broad-shouldered and scarred, stepped forward. Execution at dawn. No trial. No mercy. The law is clear. The law had always been clear when it came to her kind. She kept her head bowed, the way they liked. The way that kept the collar from cutting deeper. But inside, something older than pain was stirring. Something that had been sleeping for 12 years. It felt like embers under ash, faint at first, then hotter, pressing against her ribs until she could hardly breathe around it. Kale finally spoke. His voice rolled through the hall like distant thunder, low, unhurried, bored. You heard them. Dawn. One word. That was all it took. Selene's stomach lurched. Not from fear. From rage. The same rage that had kept her alive through the massacre, through the years of hiding, through every night she'd whispered her true name to herself so she wouldn't forget it existed. He didn't even look at her when he said it. The guards moved. Iron boots scraped stone. Rough hands seized her elbows, yanking her upright. The chains rattled, silver singing against silver, and fresh pain lanced through her wrists. She bit the inside of her cheek until copper flooded her tongue. She would not cry out. Not here. Not for them. They dragged her backward, away from the dais, toward the iron doors that led down to the cells. The storm outside roared louder, wind clawing at the windows as if trying to get in. Lightning flashed again, illuminating Kale's face for one sharp second. His jaw was tight. His fingers had stopped drumming. For the briefest heartbeat, his gaze met hers. Gray on silver. Something flickered there, something that wasn't boredom. Recognition? No. Impossible. He couldn't know. The doors groaned open. Cold, damp air rushed in from the corridor beyond, smelling of mold and old blood. The guards hauled her through, and the throne room doors slammed shut behind her with a sound like a coffin lid falling. Darkness swallowed her. They didn't bother being gentle. One of them shoved her forward, and she stumbled, chains clinking. Her bare feet slapped against icy flagstones. The corridor stretched long and narrow, lit only by flickering torches that spat black smoke. Every step sent fresh agony up her legs, but she forced herself to keep moving, to keep breathing, because if she stopped, she might never start again. They reached the first set of cells, empty, rusted bars, straw rotting on the floor. The guards pushed her past them, deeper, down a short flight of stairs. The air grew thicker, heavier. The storm's roar dulled to a low moan. Finally they stopped. A single cell, smaller than the others. No window. No light except the weak orange glow from the torch one guard carried. Iron bars thick as her wrist. A single chain bolted to the wall, waiting. They threw her inside. She hit the ground hard, knees cracking against stone. The door clanged shut. Keys turned. Boots retreated. Silence. Then, just her breathing. Harsh. Ragged. The silver collar tightened every time she swallowed, as though it could sense her fear and fed on it. She curled into herself, knees to chest, arms wrapped around her legs. The burns on her wrists throbbed in time with her pulse. She closed her eyes and tried to remember what warmth felt like. But the embers inside her refused to die. They glowed brighter now. Hotter. Pressing against her breastbone, her spine, the backs of her eyes. She could almost see them, silver fire licking through her veins, impatient, hungry. She'd spent 12 years burying it. Hiding it. Pretending she was nothing more than a scared Omega girl running from one shadow to the next. She'd learned to flinch at loud voices, to keep her eyes down, to speak in whispers. She'd learned to survive by being small. But small things can burn just as fiercely as big ones. A memory surfaced, unwanted, sharp. She was 7. The night the sky turned red. Screams echoing through the trees. Her mother's hands, slick with blood, pushing her toward the hidden tunnel. Run, Selene. Don't look back. Your name is your secret. Keep it safe. She'd run. She'd kept running. Until tonight. Until they'd caught her on the sacred ridge, trying to cross into neutral territory. Until they dragged her here, chained her in silver, and paraded her before the king who sat on the throne built from her family's bones. She pressed her forehead to her knees. Tears burned behind her eyelids, but she refused to let them fall. Not yet. The silver chains were supposed to suppress her. That was their purpose. Spelled by the same mages who'd helped slaughter her pack all those years ago. The metal was forged to bind power, to smother it, to make sure nothing like her ever rose again. But the chains were getting warm. Not just warm. Hot. She lifted her head slowly. The links around her wrists glowed faintly, soft silver light bleeding through the fractures that hadn't been there an hour ago. Tiny cracks spiderwebbed across the surface, like ice under too much pressure. Heat radiated from them, soothing instead of burning now. Almost welcoming. Her breath caught. She flexed her fingers. The chains groaned low, metallic, almost alive. A thin thread of silver fire licked along one fracture, bright and sharp, then vanished. No. She couldn't let it out. Not here. Not yet. If he saw. She curled tighter, trying to push it back down. Trying to be small again. But the fire didn't listen. It whispered instead. Selene. Her own name, spoken inside her skull. Not in her mother's voice. Not in anyone's voice she remembered. Just her. Clear. Certain. Angry. The collar around her throat heated. Not painfully. Purposefully. Like a hand resting there, steady, waiting. She swallowed. The metal shifted, almost imperceptibly. A hairline fracture ran up the side now, glowing. She stared at it. 12 years of silence. 12 years of running. 12 years of pretending the girl who'd watched her pack burn was dead. And now the chains were breaking. Not because she was strong. Because she was done pretending. The storm outside raged harder. Wind howled through the corridors like a wolf mourning its mate. Rain lashed the stone walls. Thunder rolled so close it shook the floor. Selene closed her eyes again. She pictured the throne room. Kale's face when he'd spoken her sentence. The casual cruelty of it. The way he hadn't even looked at her long enough to see the girl he'd once promised to protect. He thought she was nothing. He was wrong. The silver fire in her veins pulsed once, hard, then settled. Waiting. Dawn was coming. Execution at dawn. But dawn was still hours away. And something inside her had just woken up. She opened her eyes. The cell was still dark. The torch outside the bars had burned low, shadows dancing across the walls. But the chains around her wrists were glowing brighter now. Not bright enough for the guards to notice. Just bright enough for her to see. She lifted her hands slowly, turning them over. The burns on her palms were closing. Skin knitting together, smooth and new. The silver links vibrated against her skin, humming like a tuning fork struck deep inside her chest. She breathed in. The air tasted different. Sharper. Alive. She breathed out. Silver mist curled from her lips, faint, shimmering, gone in an instant. Her heart slammed against her ribs. This wasn't supposed to happen. The silver was supposed to hold her. But it wasn't holding anything anymore. It was listening. She pressed her back against the cold wall, chains clinking softly. The metal felt lighter now. Almost fragile. She could break them. She knew it the way she knew her own heartbeat. But if she let it out here, now the guards would come running. The council would come. Kale would come. And she wasn't ready for him to see. Not yet. She closed her hands into fists. The glow dimmed. The cracks sealed slightly. The fire retreated, curling back inside her like a cat settling to wait. But it didn't sleep. It watched. Just like she did. Hours passed. Or minutes. Time blurred in the dark. The storm never let up. She sat there, knees drawn up, forehead resting on them, listening to the rain and the thunder and the slow, steady crack of the chains as they continued to fracture, piece by tiny piece. She thought about running. About waiting for the guards to change shift, about slipping through the shadows, about disappearing into the night like she'd done so many times before. But something stopped her. Not fear. Not even hope. It was the name. Her name. The one he'd spoken in the throne room without knowing what it meant. The one no one should know. The one that had died with her pack. Selene. She whispered it once, barely audible. The chains answered, soft, metallic sigh. She smiled. Small. Sharp. Dangerous. Dawn would come. They'd come for her. They'd lead her back to the dais, back to the king who'd dismissed her like she was nothing. And when they did, she would not be nothing. She would be fire. She lifted her head. The glow in the chains had steadied. Not bright. Controlled. Waiting. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against her knees again. The storm raged on. And inside her chest, something ancient opened its eyes. If this story is already pulling at something deep inside you, if the thought of a girl chained in silver, burning from the inside out, makes your heart race just a little faster, then stay with me. Subscribe to Emmy Romance Collections. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We let them burn. The cell door screamed open sometime after the storm had finally tired itself out. No knock. No warning. Just iron hinges howling and torchlight stabbing into the darkness like a blade. Selene didn't flinch. She stayed exactly where she was, back against the wall, knees drawn up, chains coiled loosely around her wrists like sleeping serpents. The silver had gone quiet again, the fractures sealed under a thin sheen of heat, waiting. 2 guards stepped inside first. Same ones who dragged her down here. Their faces were harder now, eyes narrowed, hands resting on sword hilts. Behind them came a third figure. Taller. Broader. Moving with the kind of silence that only comes from someone who knows exactly how dangerous he is. Kale. He didn't wear the heavy ceremonial cloak from the throne room. Just black leather breeches, boots scarred from years of riding, and a dark tunic that clung to shoulders carved from battle and grief. No crown. No guards flanking him like honor. Just him alone, filling the doorway so completely the torchlight seemed to bend around him. The guards stepped aside without a word. He didn't look at them. His gaze locked on her. Gray eyes, still cold, but no longer bored. Something lived in them now, something sharp and searching and almost angry. Selene met that stare without blinking. The air between them thickened. Not with fear. Not entirely. with something heavier, older, like the moment before lightning decides to strike. He took one step inside. The guards shifted uncomfortably. One cleared his throat. "My lord," the council advised. "Out." One word. They obeyed faster than they had ever obeyed anyone else. The door clanged shut behind them. The torch in the wall bracket sputtered, throwing long shadows across the stone. Now it was just the two of them. Cale didn't move closer. Not yet. He studied her the way a predator studies something it doesn't understand, wary, patient, every muscle coiled beneath calm. Selene felt the silver chains stir again. A faint warmth licked up her arms. She clenched her fists to keep them still. He noticed. Of course he noticed. His head tilted slightly, the smallest motion, but it felt like the whole room shifted with it. "You're not screaming," he said quietly. His voice was different down here. No throne room echo. No council audience. Just low, rough, intimate, like he was speaking only for her ears. She didn't answer. He took another step. Slow. Deliberate. The chains around her ankles scraped softly against stone. "You're not begging either." Still no answer. Another step. Close enough now that she could smell him, rain-soaked leather, cedar smoke, and something darker underneath. Something that reminded her of forest fires long after the flames have died. He crouched. Not in front of her. Slightly to the side. Keeping distance. Keeping control. But close enough that she could see the thin white scar that ran from his left temple down to the corner of his jaw. A mark she didn't remember from the stories. A mark that hadn't been there when he was 17. His eyes searched her face. Not her chains. Not her burns. Her face. As though he were looking for someone he used to know. Selene's heart slammed once hard, then steadied. She wouldn't give him anything. Not yet. "You have a name," he said. Not a question. A statement. Her throat tightened around the collar. The silver warmed again, almost comforting now. He waited. Silence stretched between them, tight, electric, fragile. Finally she spoke. One word. Many. His mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Something closer to recognition. "Selene." He said it softly. The way someone says a prayer they stopped believing in years ago. Her blood turned to silver fire. The chains answered, sharp, metallic crack, like bones breaking under pressure. Cale's eyes flicked to the links around her wrists. The fractures were visible again. Glowing. Thin threads of silver light weaving through the metal like veins. He didn't move. Didn't reach for his weapon. Just watched. And something in his expression changed. Not fear. Not triumph. Regret. Raw. Sudden. Deep enough to carve. He exhaled slowly. "I thought you were dead." For words. They landed heavier than any blow the guards had given her. Selene felt the air leave her lungs. She wanted to scream at him. Wanted to claw that regret off his face and throw it back at him like broken glass. Wanted to ask why he'd sat on that throne 12 years ago while her pack burned, why he'd let the council sentence her without a second glance, why he'd spoken her name like it was a ghost he'd buried long ago. But she didn't. She leaned forward instead. Just enough that the chains pulled taut. Just enough that he could see the silver fire flickering in her eyes. "You thought wrong." Her voice came out low. Steady. Dangerous. Cale didn't flinch. He held her gaze. And for one heartbeat, maybe two, the mask of the Alpha King cracked. She saw the boy beneath it. 17. Bleeding. Kneeling beside his dying father. Swearing a vow on blood and ash that he would find the last flame child. That he would protect her. That he would never let the massacre happen again. She saw the promise. She saw the failure. And she hated him for both. He rose slowly. Never breaking eye contact. "I'm getting you out of here." Not a question. Not a plea. A decision. Selene laughed. Once. Sharp. Bitter. "You sentenced me to death. I sentenced a nameless trespasser. You looked me in the eye and said, 'Dawn.' I didn't know. You should have. He closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them again, the regret was gone, replaced by something harder. Something that looked a lot like resolve. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "Not now. Not here. But I am getting you out of these chains. And then we're leaving." She stared at him, searching for the lie. She found none. Only the truth, brutal, inconvenient, impossible. He was still the man whose father had ordered her pack slaughtered. He was still the king who'd sat on a throne built from their bones. But he was also the boy who'd made a promise. And right now, in this freezing cell, with silver fire licking through her veins and dawn creeping closer, that promise was the only thing standing between her and execution. She hated it. She hated him. But she hated dying more. Slowly, very slowly, she uncurled her legs. The chains clinked softly. She held out her wrists. Not in surrender. In challenge. Break them. Kale looked down at the glowing fractures. Then back at her face. Something flickered in his eyes, something that might have been pride or grief or both. He reached out. His fingers brushed the silver links. The metal hissed. Not at him. At her. As though it recognized the touch of someone who'd once sworn to protect what it was trying to contain. Kale's jaw tightened. He wrapped both hands around the chain between her wrists. No spell. No key. Just strength. And will. The silver shrieked. Cracks raced outward, bright, blinding, then shattered. Silver fire erupted in thin, searing arcs. Selene gasped. Not from pain. From release. The collar followed a heartbeat later. Kale tore it apart with his bare hands. Blood welled on his palms. He didn't flinch. The broken pieces fell to the stone. Smoking. Dead. For the first time in 12 years, nothing held her. Nothing burned her. Nothing suppressed the fire. It rose inside her chest, slow, deliberate, beautiful. She stood. Legs shaking. Not from weakness. From power. Kale stepped back, giving her space, giving her choice. She lifted her chin, met his gaze, and felt the first real spark of something dangerous bloom between them. Not trust. Not yet. But possibility. Raw. Unforgiving. Alive. He extended one bloodied hand. Not to take. To offer. "We don't have much time." Selene looked at that hand. At the king who'd dismissed her. At the man who'd just broken her chains. At the boy who'd once sworn her name like a vow. She didn't take his hand. Not yet. But she stepped forward. Past the broken silver. Past the dead collar. Into the torchlight. Into the unknown. And the fire inside her answered, bright, fierce, unafraid. Dawn was still hours away. But the revolution had already begun. The corridor beyond the cell stretched like a throat made of stone, narrow, damp, swallowing sound. Kale moved ahead, boots silent on the flagstones, every step measured. Selene followed close enough to feel the heat rolling off his back, far enough that she could still bolt if this turned out to be another cage dressed up as rescue. No words passed between them. Only the drip of water somewhere far off, the faint scrape of her bare feet, the slow burn of silver fire still licking through her veins like a second heartbeat. They climbed a narrow spiral stair carved into the bedrock. No torches here. Only slivers of stormlight leaking through arrow slits high above. Enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the way his right hand never strayed far from the dagger at his hip. He didn't trust her. She didn't trust him. Good. Trust was a luxury neither of them could afford. At the top of the stair a small iron door waited rusted, half hidden behind a tapestry of woven wolves. Kale pressed a palm to the stone beside it. A faint click. The door swung inward on oiled hinges. A servant passage. Narrow. Forgotten. Smelling of old wax and dust. He stepped through first. Selene hesitated on the threshold. Every instinct screamed to run the other way, back down into the dark where she knew how to disappear. But the fire inside her had other ideas. It pushed forward, warm against her ribs, urging her after him like a hand at the small of her back. She crossed. The door sealed behind her with a soft, final sound. Now the passage was truly black except for the faint silver glow still clinging to her skin. It lit the walls in soft, shifting blue-white enough to see the tight line of Cale's jaw, the way his breath came a fraction too fast. They moved quickly, through tunnels that twisted like roots under the palace, past locked grates that smelled of wine cellars and armories, up another stair, down a corridor lined with tapestries so old the colors had bled into gray. Finally, he stopped at a plain wooden door, no handle, no lock visible. Cale pressed his thumb to a knot in the wood. A hidden latch gave. The door opened into a small chamber. Not a cell. Not a throne room. A private study, low ceiling, heavy beams, one tall window shuttered against the dying storm. A fire burned low in the hearth, casting long amber fingers across shelves of leather-bound books, maps pinned to the walls, a single narrow bed pushed against the far corner. He closed the door behind them, bolted it, turned. For the first time since the cell, he really looked at her. Not at the broken chains still dangling from her wrists like broken promises. At her. At the hollows under her eyes. The bruises blooming along her collarbones. The way her shift hung off shoulders too thin from too many years of running. Something flickered across his face, quick, gone before she could name it. Sit, he said. Low. Rough. There was only one chair. Carved oak. Worn smooth by years of use. She didn't move. He didn't push. Instead, he crossed to the fire, crouched, fed it fresh wood. Flames snapped higher. Warmth spread across the floorboards like spilled honey. Only then did he speak again. You're bleeding. She glanced down. Crimson trickled from the burns on her palms, slow now, sluggish. The silver fire was healing them, but not fast enough. Cale pulled a strip of clean linen from a drawer, poured water from a pitcher into a shallow basin, carried both to her. He knelt. Not touching. Not yet. Just holding the cloth out. Selene stared at the offered linen like it might bite. Then slowly, she extended her hands. He took one wrist gently, turned it palm up. The burns looked worse in the firelight, raw, weeping, edges blackened. He dipped the cloth, pressed it to the worst of the wounds. Pain flared sharp, bright, then dulled as cool water met heat. Selene hissed through her teeth. Cale's fingers tightened fractionally around her wrist. Not restraining. Steadying. He worked in silence. Cleaning. Drying. Wrapping the linen with careful, practiced movements. Every brush of his skin against hers sent sparks racing up her arm, not pain, not exactly. Memory. She remembered hands like these once. Not his. Her father's. Strong. Calloused. Gentle when they bandaged her scraped knees after she'd tried to shift too young and too reckless. The memory hit like a fist to the sternum. She jerked her hand back. Cale froze. Did I hurt you? No. Lie. Not the burns. The past. She turned away, staring into the fire. The flames danced red and gold and hungry, like the night the sky burned. She spoke before she could stop herself. They took everything. Her voice came out small, cracked. Cale stayed kneeling, silent. They came at dusk. No warning. No parley. Just torches and steel and howls that weren't wolf. My mother pushed me into the root cellar. Told me to stay quiet. Told me my name was dead now. That I had to make it stay dead. She swallowed. I heard her scream once. Just once. Then nothing. The fire popped. A log collapsed. Sparks flew upward. I waited until the scream stopped. Until the smoke was so thick I couldn't breathe. Then I crawled out through the old escape tunnel. The one only the children knew about. She looked down at her bandaged hands. I ran. For days. Weeks. Hid in caves. Stole food from farms. Learned to keep my head down. Learned to flinch when anyone looked too long. Learned that if you're small enough, quiet enough, people forget you exist. Kale's breathing had gone very still. She kept going. Because if she stopped now, the words might never come out again. They said the flame bloodline was dangerous, unstable, that we'd burn the world if we ever rose again. So they hunted every last one of us, made sure no child survived who carried the silver fire. She lifted her gaze to his. But I did. The silver glow under her skin brightened, soft, defiant. I carried it, hid it, buried it so deep I almost forgot it was there. Until tonight. Until you said my name like it was nothing. Kale's throat worked. I didn't know. You sat on that throne. My father. Your father is dead. You're the one who rules now. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were dark with something that looked dangerously close to shame. I searched for you. Selene laughed, short, bitter. You searched for a ghost. I searched for the girl my father made me swear to protect. The girl he told me would be the last. The one who could either save us or end us. He rose slowly, towered over her, but not threatening. Exhausted. I spent years chasing rumors, false sightings, burned villages, girls with silver eyes who turned out to be nothing more than desperate runaways. Every time I came up empty, I told myself it was better, safer, that if you were truly gone, the prophecy died with you. He looked at her now, really looked. And then tonight, they dragged you in. Nameless, broken. And I looked at you and I knew. Selene's chest ached. Not from anger this time. From something worse. Hope. She hated it. You looked at me and sentenced me to die. I looked at a trespasser wearing silver chains. I didn't see you. Not until you looked back. Silence stretched. Heavy. Fragile. She stood. Forced her legs steady. Why no? Because the chains broke when I said your name. Because the fire answered. Because I finally saw what I'd been too arrogant to see before. He stepped closer. Not crowding. Just close enough that she could feel the warmth of him through the thin shift. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to live long enough for me to prove I'm not the monster you think I am. Selene searched his face. Saw the boy who'd knelt in blood and made a promise. Saw the king who'd carried that promise like a wound that never closed. Saw the man who'd just torn silver chains apart with his bare hands because the alternative was watching her die. She didn't speak. But she didn't step away either. The fire crackled. Outside, the storm had quieted to a low, restless mutter. Inside her chest, the silver flame burned steady. Not raging. Not hiding. Waiting. And for the first time in 12 years, Selene wondered if maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry the weight of her bloodline alone. The hidden passage let them out into the palace gardens at the hour when night forgets it is supposed to end. Mist hung low over the blackthorn hedges, silvered by the last stubborn stars. The storm had finally bled itself dry. Now only a soft, steady drizzle remained, tapping against broad leaves like patient fingers. Kale led the way through shadowed paths no servant would dare walk after dark, paths lined with ancient yew trees whose branches twisted like old grief. Their needles brushed Selene's bare arms as she passed, leaving cold, wet kisses on her skin. She followed without question. Not because she trusted him. Because the fire inside her had chosen direction, and right now it pointed forward, toward whatever waited at the end of this garden. They moved in silence, broken only by the drip of rain and the soft crunch of gravel underfoot. Kale's shoulders stayed tense, head turning every few steps to scan the darkness. His hand never left the hilt of the dagger. Selene noticed how his knuckles stayed white, how his breathing stayed too controlled. He was afraid. Not of her. Of what might happen if someone found them before they reached wherever he was taking her. They passed a crumbling marble fountain, its basin cracked, filled with black water and dead leaves. Moonlight caught on the carved wolf heads that ringed it. Their stone eyes seemed to follow her as she passed. Finally, the path ended at a wall of living ivy so thick it looked like a green curtain drawn across the world. Kale stopped. pressed his palm flat to the stone beneath the vines. A low rumble answered deep in the earth. The ivy parted like water, revealing an arched gateway of black basalt, half swallowed by roots and time. Runes glowed faintly along the lintel, silver blue, the same color that still shimmered under Selene's skin. Kale glanced back at her. Beyond this gate is the grove of first breath. No one enters without invitation. Not even the king. He stepped through first. Selene followed. The air changed the moment she crossed the threshold. Thicker, warmer, alive. The drizzle stopped as though someone had drawn a curtain across the sky. Instead, a soft luminescence rose from the ground, pale silver mist curling around her ankles like curious smoke. Trees older than kingdoms stretched overhead, their trunks wide enough that 10 wolves could stand shoulder to shoulder and still not touch. Leaves the color of midnight rustled without wind, whispering secrets in a language she almost understood. At the center of the grove stood a single stone circle. 9 standing stones, each taller than 2 men, arranged in a perfect ring. Between them lay a pool of still water, no ripple, no reflection of the sky. Only darkness so deep it looked like it could swallow stars. Kale stopped at the edge of the circle. Selene felt the pull before she saw it. The fire in her chest surged, bright, eager, almost painful. It tugged her forward like a rope tied around her heart. She stepped past him, into the ring. The moment both feet touched the moss between the stones, the world remembered her. A low hum rose from the earth deep, resonant, vibrating through her bones. The standing stones began to glow soft at first, then brighter, silver light tracing every carved rune, every ancient scar. The pool in the center stirred. Not rippling, breathing. Selene's breath caught. She felt it, the same silver fire that lived inside her, rising from the pool, from the stones, from the trees themselves. It reached for her, welcomed her, recognized her. A vision unfolded without warning. Not in her mind, in the air. Images woven from light and shadow played across the surface of the pool like smoke made solid. A woman with hair like spilled moonlight stood on a ridge under a blood-red moon. Flames of pure silver poured from her open hands, reshaping stone into living wolves, turning ash back into green. Behind her stretched an endless forest, whole, untouched, eternal. The first wolves. The original pack. Born of flame and breath and starlight. The vision shifted. The same woman knelt before a circle of stones identical to these. She pressed her palms to the earth. Silver fire poured into the ground. The stones drank it, glowing brighter, then sent it back in a wave that swept across the land, binding wolf to human, instinct to soul, power to purpose. A voice, not heard with ears, rolled through the grove. The flame is the bridge. The bridge must never break. When shadow falls across the first blood, the child of flame will rise to mend it, or burn what remains. The images changed again. Faster now. A battlefield soaked in red. Wolves tearing at wolves. Torches. Screams. A boy, 17, bleeding, kneeling beside a dying king. The king's hand gripping the boy's wrist. Blood mingling. Words forced through cracked lips. Find her. Protect her. The flame cannot die with us. The boy's face, Kale's face, twisted with grief and vow. The vision snapped forward. The same boy, older now, searching ruined villages. Questioning terrified survivors. Chasing every whisper of silver eyes. Finding nothing. Again. And again. Until tonight. Until a nameless girl dragged in chains. Until the name slipped from his lips. Until the silver fire answered. The pool went still. The light in the standing stones dimmed, but did not die. Selene stood frozen. Her chest rose and fell too fast. She turned slowly. Kale hadn't moved. He watched her with an expression she couldn't read, equal parts awe and dread. You knew, she said. Voice barely above a whisper. I suspected. You brought me here to see. I brought you here because the grove only opens for those it calls. She looked down at her hands. Silver light still danced under her skin, brighter now, steadier. Not raging. Claiming. She lifted her gaze back to him. What does it mean? Kale exhaled slowly. It means the prophecy isn't dead. It was never dead. It was waiting. He stepped into the circle, careful, reverent. Stopped a few paces from her. The first wolves didn't just create our kind. They tied their power to the land itself. To the balance. When my father's council decided the flame bloodline was too dangerous, too unpredictable, they tried to sever that tie. They thought killing every carrier would stop the power from ever rising again. His voice dropped lower. They were wrong. Selene felt the weight of the words settle into her bones. I'm the last. You're the last they know of. She shook her head. There were others once. Cousins. Distant kin. All gone. I watched the last of them burn when I was 9. I was the only one left hiding in the rafters. Kale's jaw tightened. Then you were the last. He looked at the standing stones, then back at her. And the grove just welcomed you. Silence wrapped around them, thick with meaning neither wanted to name yet. Selene stepped closer to the pool, looked down into its black depths. No reflection stared back. Only darkness, and in that darkness, the faint echo of silver fire. She spoke without turning. Do you believe it? The prophecy? Kale answered quietly. I believe what I saw tonight. The chains breaking. The fire answering your name. The grove opening its gate. He paused. I believe you're more than a prisoner. More than a ghost. More than the girl I failed to find. She turned then. Met his eyes. Saw the boy who'd sworn a vow. Saw the king who'd carried guilt like armor. Saw the man standing in a sacred place, offering her the only truth he had left. I don't know if I'm the one who mends the world, she said. I only know I'm tired of hiding what I am. The silver light under her skin pulsed once, bright, certain. Kale stepped closer. Close enough she could see the reins still clinging to his lashes. Close enough she could feel the heat of him cutting through the damp night air. Then stop hiding, he said. Simple. Raw. No command. Just permission. Selene lifted her chin. The grove answered. A soft wind moved through the trees, not cold, not warm. Something older. Something that smelled of pine and starlight and ancient promises kept. The standing stones hummed again, low, approving. The pool reflected her now, not her face. Her power. Silver flame curling around her silhouette like wings made of light. She felt it settle into her, not as a weapon. As truth. She was the child of the flame. She was the last daughter of the first wolves. And she was done being small. Kale watched the light play across her skin. Watched the doubt in her eyes give way to something fiercer. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The grove had spoken for them both. Outside the circle, the first gray promise of dawn touched the horizon. Time was running out. But something far older than time had just woken up. And it wore her name. Dawn arrived like a thief, gray, reluctant, stealing the last of the night without apology. The grove still hummed faintly when they left it, the standing stones dimming to a patient glow, the pool settling back into its endless black mirror. Selene felt the silver fire coil tighter inside her chest, not retreating, just gathering itself like a wolf curling tail over nose before the hunt begins. Kale walked ahead again, pace brisk now, every line of his body alert. The mist in the gardens had thickened, turning the blackthorn hedges into pale ghosts. Rain no longer fell, but the air stayed heavy, saturated, pressing against skin like damp cloth. They didn't speak. There was nothing safe left to say. Not yet. They reached the servant passage again, slipped through the ivy-covered gate, down the narrow tunnel, past the rusted door that had once hidden her cell. Kale paused only once, ear pressed to the wood, listening for footsteps on the other side. Nothing. He pushed through. The corridor beyond was still empty, torches guttering low in their brackets, shadows stretching long and thin. They moved faster now, almost running, boots and bare feet whispering against stone. They emerged into a lower hall used for storage. Barrels of wine, crates of dried meat, racks of unused armor. A side door led to the stables. Cale reached for it. Before his hand touched the latch, voices exploded on the other side. Sharp. Angry. Many. Told you the cell was empty. Impossible, the wards. Find them. Now. Cale froze. Selene felt the fire flare and answer, bright, defensive, ready. He turned to her. Eyes hard. Stay behind me. She almost laughed. Instead, she stepped up beside him. Behind you is where they expect me to be. His jaw clenched. But he didn't argue. He shoved the door open. Morning light, thin, watery, spilled in from the stable yard beyond. Horses stamped nervously in their stalls. Grooms and stable boys scattered like startled birds. And in the center of the yard stood a knot of armored wolves, council guards, Elder Garrick at their head, sword already drawn. Behind him, more figures, Elder Vera in her dark robes, 2 younger alphas whose names Selene didn't know, and a handful of sentries with crossbows leveled. Garrick's scarred face twisted when he saw Cale. My lord. The title sounded like an accusation. Cale stepped fully into the yard. Selene stayed at his shoulder, chin high, bare feet planted on cold cobblestones, silver light flickering faintly along her arms like distant lightning. Garrick's gaze snapped to her. Then back to Cale. You freed the prisoner. She was never a prisoner, Cale said. Voice calm. Lethal. She was under my protection. A ripple moved through the guards, shock, confusion, anger. Vera stepped forward, robes dragging across wet stone. Protection? Her voice cracked like dry wood. You spoke her sentence yourself. Dawn. No mercy. I spoke a sentence on a nameless trespasser. Cale's tone never rose. I did not know who she was. And now you do? Garrick spat the words. Now you know she carries the flame? The same flame your father spent blood and oaths to eradicate. Selene felt the accusation hit Cale like a physical blow. He didn't flinch. The flame was never meant to be eradicated, he said. It was meant to be understood. Vera laughed, short, bitter. Understood? It is a curse. A wildfire waiting for dry grass. Your father knew. The council knew. We buried that power for a reason. Selene spoke then. Quiet. Clear. You buried children for a reason. Every head turned. Vera's eyes narrowed to slits. You dare. I dare, Selene cut in. Because I was there. I heard the screams. I smelled my mother burning. I watched cousins no older than 10 dragged into the open and cut down because someone decided their blood was too dangerous to exist. The silver fire in her veins pulsed, visible now, soft threads of light weaving beneath her skin. Garrick lifted his sword an inch. You will not speak of the purge here. I will speak of it everywhere, she answered. Until the truth stops hiding behind pretty words like purge and starts wearing the name it deserves. Massacre. A growl rolled through the yard, low, collective, from half a dozen throats. Cale stepped half in front of her. Stand down. The command cracked like thunder. The growls died. But the tension didn't. Garrick's lip curled. You defend her. After everything. I defend what is mine to defend. The words landed heavier than he'd meant them to. Selene felt them settle into her chest, warm, dangerous, confusing. Yours. She pushed the thought aside. Vera lifted one thin hand. Enough. The girl is a threat. The prophecy speaks of flame that mends or flame that consumes. We cannot risk the latter. Cale's voice dropped to something colder than winter stone. The prophecy also speaks of a bridge. A child of flame who binds what was broken. You would kill the bridge before you even know if it holds. Garrick took a step forward. Then let her prove it. Let her face the circle. Let the grove judge. Selene felt the fire flare in answer, eager, almost joyful. She stepped around Cale. I already did. Silence. Dead silence. Vera's face went gray. You entered the grove? It opened for me. Garrick laughed, harsh, disbelieving. Lies. Kale spoke quietly. I was with her. I saw the stones light. I saw the pool breathe. I heard the voice. The guards shifted, uneasy now, uncertain. One of the younger alphas, a lean man with pale hair, spoke up. Then the grove has chosen. Vera rounded on him. The grove is stone and memory. It does not choose. It chose tonight. Kale met Vera's gaze. Step aside, elder. Let us pass. She didn't move. Neither did Garrick. Instead, Garrick lifted his sword higher. You will not leave this yard with her. Kale exhaled slowly. Then you force my hand. The change came fast. One heartbeat Kale was man. The next he was wolf, massive, black as midnight, eyes still storm gray and blazing with fury. The shift tore through his clothes in a spray of shredded leather. A roar ripped from his throat, deep, commanding, shaking the stones underfoot. The guards hesitated. Only for a second. Then half of them shifted to gray and tawny and russet wolves snarling, hackles raised. Selene felt the fire surge, hot, bright, protective. She didn't shift. Not yet. Instead, she lifted both hands. Silver flame erupted from her palms, not wild, not uncontrolled. Controlled. Deliberate. Twin pillars of light that rose 10 feet into the air before curving outward like wings. The wolves froze. Every one of them. Even Kale turned his massive head, ears pricked, eyes wide. The flame didn't burn the air. It warmed it. It smelled of cedar smoke and starlight and something older than memory. Selene's voice carried over the yard, soft, steady, carrying the same resonance as the grove itself. Stand down. The wolves whined low, uncertain. Garrick snarled, refusing to yield. He lunged. Straight for her throat. Kale met him midair, two massive bodies crashing together, teeth and claws flashing. The impact shook the yard. Horses screamed in their stalls. Stable boys bolted for cover. Selene didn't move. She held the flame steady. Watched Kale fight, not to kill, but to dominate. He pinned Garrick in seconds, jaws closed around the other wolf's throat, not piercing, just holding. A low growl vibrated through the yard. Submit. Garrick went limp. Kale released him. Stepped back. Shifted back to human in one fluid motion, naked now, blood streaking his chest and arms, breathing hard. He looked at the rest of the guards. At Vera. At the younger alpha who had spoken for the grove. Anyone else? Silence. Vera's face was a mask of fury and fear. You would choose her over your pack? Kale straightened. I'd choose the future over the grave we've been digging for 12 years. He turned to Selene. She let the silver flame dim slowly, gracefully, until only faint light danced along her fingertips. Their eyes met. Something passed between them, wordless, electric, unbreakable. He held out his hand. This time she took it. Fingers lacing through his warm, bloodied, steady. The guards parted. Not willingly. But they parted. Kale led her past them, across the yard, toward the stable archway that opened onto the outer grounds. Vera's voice followed them, sharp, venomous. This is not over. Kale didn't look back. Neither is she. They stepped through the arch. Into the open land beyond the palace walls. Into the forest that waited dark, ancient, calling. Behind them, the first howls rose, not pursuit. Warning. The pack had fractured. The world had noticed. And the girl who carried flame was no longer running. She was walking forward, hand in hand with the king who had once dismissed her, into whatever storm came next. The forest swallowed them whole the moment they crossed the palace boundary. Ancient oaks stood shoulder to shoulder, their trunks wide enough to hide entire families, bark rough and scarred like old soldiers. Ferns brushed Selene's calves as she walked, wet leaves sticking to her bare feet. The air smelled of moss, rain-soaked earth, and the sharp green promise of things still growing despite the season. Somewhere high above, a raven called once, low, questioning, then fell silent. Kale led without hesitation. He had shifted back into clothes scavenged from the stable: rough linen shirt, dark breeches, boots that still carried the scent of hay and horse. Blood had dried in thin dark lines across his forearms and collarbone, but he moved as though it weighed nothing. His shoulders stayed tense, head turning every few minutes to listen for pursuit. No howls followed. Not yet. They walked for what felt like hours. The light changed slowly, gray dawn bleeding into muted gold as the sun fought its way through heavy cloud. Mist lingered in the hollows, curling around roots like smoke from a dying fire. Selene felt every step in her legs, in the small cuts on her soles, in the lingering ache where Silver had bitten deepest. But the fire inside her kept the worst of the cold at bay, a steady warmth that radiated outward until her skin no longer pebbled. Kale finally stopped beside a narrow stream that cut through the undergrowth like a silver vein. Water ran clear over smooth stones, gurgling softly. He knelt, cupped his hands, drank deeply, then looked back at her. "We rest here. 10 minutes. No more." Selene nodded once. She lowered herself onto a fallen log, moss soft under her thighs. The forest pressed close, alive, watchful. She could almost feel the trees breathing with her. Kale gathered dry twigs, small branches, built a quick fire in a shallow pit he scraped with his boot. Sparks caught fast. Flames licked upward, small, controlled, hungry. He sat across from her. Not too close. Close enough. The fire painted shifting gold across his face, catching on the scar that ran from temple to jaw. It softened the hard lines there, made him look younger, more tired. He stared into the flames for a long moment, then spoke. "I never stopped looking." The words came out rough, like they'd been waiting years to be freed. Selene kept her gaze on the fire. "I know." A beat of silence. "You don't believe me." "I believe you looked." She finally met his eyes. "I don't believe you wanted to find me." Kale exhaled through his nose, sharp, pained. "I wanted to find a child. A little girl I could hide, protect, keep safe until the prophecy forgot her name." He rubbed a hand over his jaw. "By the time I realized the child had grown into a woman who hated everything my blood stood for, I told myself it was better if you stayed a ghost." Selene felt the old anger stir, familiar, comforting in its sharpness. "You let them call me a trespasser. You let them chain me in silver that burned. You looked me in the eye and said dawn." His throat worked. "I did. No excuses. No deflection. Just the truth, bare, brutal." She leaned forward slightly. "Why break the chains?" "Because the moment I said your name, I felt it." He pressed a fist to his chest. "Here. Like something waking up that had been asleep since I was 17. Like the vow my father forced on me finally had weight again." He looked at her, really looked. "And because I saw you. Not the prisoner. Not the trespasser. You." The woman who carried 12 years of grief in her eyes and still lifted her chin when the council spat at her feet. Selene's breath caught. She hadn't expected honesty. Not like this. Not raw enough to hurt them both. She looked down at her bandaged hands. The linen was stained, edges fraying. Quietly she said, "I used to dream about you." Kale went still. "Not the king. The boy from the stories my mother told me before the massacre. The boy who rode with my father on border patrols. The boy who laughed when I tried to catch fireflies and ended up covered in mud instead." She swallowed. "I dreamed you'd come. That you'd find me. That you'd say my name like it mattered." Another long silence. The fire snapped. A branch collapsed, sending sparks spiraling upward. Kale's voice came softer now. "I did find you. Eventually. And I said your name like it was a death sentence." Selene laughed once, small, broken. "Yeah." He rose slowly. Moved around the fire. Stopped in front of her. Not towering. Just there. She looked up. Moonlight filtered through the canopy now, mixing with firelight, painting silver and gold across his skin. He extended one hand, palm up. Not demanding. Offering. I can't undo what happened. I can't bring them back. I can't erase the years you ran alone. His voice cracked on the last word. But I can stand here now. And I can stay. Until you tell me to leave. Or until the world burns us both. Selene stared at that hand. Saw the dried blood still crusted under his nails. Saw the faint tremble he couldn't quite hide. Saw the man who had once been a boy who promised to protect her. Slowly, achingly, she lifted her own hand. Placed it in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm, careful, steady. He didn't pull. He just held. And something inside her chest cracked open, not painfully. Relieved. She rose. They stood inches apart. The fire warmed one side of her face. His breath brushed the other. She could feel the heat of him through the thin shift, solid, real, alive. He lifted his free hand. Hesitated. Then brushed a damp strand of hair from her cheek. His thumb lingered there, barely touching. Selene closed her eyes. Just for a second. Let herself feel it, the gentleness, after so much violence. When she opened them again, his gaze was dark, searching. I see you, he whispered. All of you. The grief. The rage. The fire. The girl who still dreams about fireflies even though she knows they burn out. Her throat tightened. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Instead, she leaned forward, just a fraction. Their foreheads touched. Breaths mingled. Warm. Shaky. Alive. The forest held its breath around them. No wind. No raven call. Just the soft crackle of the fire and the steady thud of two hearts finding the same rhythm. She felt the silver flame inside her pulse, not in anger. In recognition. In something softer. Something dangerous. Something that might one day be called trust. Cale's hand slid to the nape of her neck, gentle, reverent. His lips hovered above hers. Close enough to taste the promise. Close enough to break it. He waited. Always waiting for her choice. Selene lifted her chin the last fraction of distance. Their mouths brushed soft, tentative, electric. Not a claim. A question. She answered by pressing closer. The kiss deepened slowly, hungry, careful, aching with everything they hadn't said. His arms came around her, strong, protective, trembling slightly. She slid her hands up his chest, feeling the hard beat of his heart under her palms. Felt the scars beneath the linen. Felt the warmth that wasn't just fire. When they finally parted, breathing hard, foreheads still touching, neither spoke. Words would have ruined it. Instead, he pressed one last kiss to her temples, soft, lingering. Then stepped back. Just enough. We have to keep moving. She nodded. Took his hand again. They kicked dirt over the fire. Stomped out the last embers. Then walked on deeper into the forest. Hand in hand. Not safe. Not whole. But together. And for the first time in 12 years, Selene didn't feel like she was running alone. The night stretched ahead, dark, uncertain, full of teeth. But beside her walked a man who had finally chosen to stay. And inside her chest, the silver flame burned brighter than ever. Not to destroy. To illuminate. To begin. The forest gave way to open moorland as the second day bled into dusk. Low hills rolled like the spine of some sleeping beast, covered in heather that had gone purple-black with the season's end. Wind moved across the expanse in slow, mournful waves, carrying the scent of frost and distant pine. No trees here. Nowhere to hide. Just sky pressing down heavy and low, clouds the color of old bruises. Cale and Selene had run most of the night. Not from pursuit, at least not the kind they could hear. From the ache of what had passed between them beside that dying fire. They hadn't spoken of the kiss. Hadn't needed to. It lived in the way their hands brushed when they passed water between them, in the way his gaze lingered a heartbeat too long when she turned away, in the way her silver fire flared brighter whenever he stepped close. They moved north. Toward the old borderlands. toward neutral ground where packs still remembered the first wolves and didn't bow to any king. Or so Kale had said. Selene wasn't sure she believed in neutral ground anymore. They crested a low rise just as the sun slipped below the horizon. Below them lay a shallow valley. At its heart stood a circle of standing stones, not the sacred grove, but something older, rougher. Weather-worn slabs arranged in a loose ring, half buried in turf. Between them burned a bonfire, unnaturally bright, flames leaping blue and violet. Shadows moved around it. Many shadows. Too many. Kale went rigid beside her. Council riders, he breathed. They've called a conclave. Selene felt the silver fire coil tight in her chest, alert, wary. How did they know we'd come this way? They didn't. His voice was grim. They knew where the last neutral ground lies. They're waiting for us to reach it. She looked down at the firelit circle. Figures stood in a loose perimeter, armored wolves, council elders in dark robes, younger alphas whose banners she didn't recognize. At the center, beside the flames, stood Vera and Garrick. Beside them waited a third figure she hadn't seen before, tall, silver-haired, wearing a cloak the color of fresh blood. She felt Kale's breath catch. Elder Theron, he said quietly. My father's old war advisor. He was supposed to be dead. Selene's stomach turned cold. They had no choice but to descend. The wind carried voices now, low chants in the old tongue, words that tasted like ash on her tongue. When they reached the outer ring of stones, every head turned. Silence fell like a blade. Vera stepped forward first. Her smile was thin, sharp. You came. Both of you. Kale moved in front of Selene. Not protective. Defiant. You called a conclave without the king's seal. Theron laughed low, gravelly. The king forfeited his seal the moment he broke silver chains and fled with the flame child. Garrick spat into the dirt. He chose her over pack law. Kale's voice stayed steady. I chose the prophecy over fear. Vera lifted one hand. A scroll appeared, yellowed parchment sealed with black wax. We have read the old texts again. Carefully. The prophecy does not speak of mending. Her eyes glittered. It speaks of choice. Storm and flame will forge a new world, or die trying. But the elders who wrote it also wrote the warning. Flame unchecked consumes everything it touches. She unrolled the scroll. Read aloud. Let no child of forbidden blood stand before the circle unchained. Let no king shield what was meant to be extinguished. Should the flame rise, the pack must choose, submission or annihilation. Selene felt the words land like stones in her stomach. Kale took a step forward. That clause was added after the massacre. By my father. It was never part of the original prophecy. Theron's silver eyes narrowed. And yet it is law now. He turned to the gathered wolves. Tonight we settle it. The girl stands before the circle. She shows us her power. We judge. If she is the bridge, she lives. If she is the wildfire, she burns. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Selene felt every stare like a brand. She stepped past Kale. Chin high, bare feet silent on cold turf. I'll stand. Kale's hand shot out, caught her wrist. Don't. She met his gaze. I'm done hiding. His fingers tightened, then released. Slowly. She walked into the circle alone. The bonfire roared higher as she approached, violet flames licking the darkening sky. The standing stones began to hum low, dissonant, nothing like the welcoming resonance of the grove. She stopped in the center, raised her hands. Silver fire answered instantly, pouring from her palms, curling around her like liquid starlight. It didn't burn the ground. It didn't scorch the air. It simply was bright, beautiful, ancient. The gathered wolves watched. Some in awe, some in fear. Vera's voice cut through the silence. Show us the truth of your blood. Selene closed her eyes. Let the fire rise higher. It formed shapes, wolves made of light, running across nothing. A ridge under a blood moon. A mother pushing her daughter into darkness. A promise sworn in blood. The images hung in the air, clear, undeniable. Then they shifted. The massacre. Torches. Screams. Children dragged from hiding. Silver chains forged in haste. Elders chanting words meant to bind power forever. The final image, a boy 17 kneeling beside a dying king, swearing to find the last flame child. The flame showed everything. Unfiltered. Unforgiving. Gasps moved through the crowd. Kale stood frozen at the circle's edge, face pale, eyes wide. Vera stepped forward. Her voice rose, sharp, triumphant. You see? The flame carries memory. And memory carries vengeance. She will never forgive. She will never bend. She will burn us all. Selene opened her eyes. The silver fire dimmed, but did not vanish. She spoke quietly. I carry memory. Yes, but I also carry choice. Theron laughed again. Choice? You are the last. Your blood demands retribution. The prophecy itself says storm and flame must either forge together, or die trying. He turned to Kale. And you, my king, have chosen flame. You broke the chains. You kissed her under moonlight. You brought her here. Kale's jaw clenched. I chose truth. Theron's smile was cruel. Then let truth decide. He raised one hand. From the shadows behind the stones stepped a figure Selene had never expected to see again. A woman. Tall. Thin. Hair the color of winter ash. Eyes the exact silver gray as Selene's own. Her mother. Or what was left of her. Chains of black iron wrapped her wrists, spelled smoking. Her shift hung in rags. Scars crisscrossed her arms, her throat. Alive. Barely. Selene's world tilted. No. The word tore from her. The silver fire surged wild, now uncontrolled. Vera stepped beside the chained woman. We kept her. Hidden. Insurance. In case the last flame child ever surfaced. She pressed a dagger to the woman's throat. One word from you, girl. One flare of power. And she dies. Again. Kale roared, shift beginning, bones cracking. Theron's voice cut through. Choose, king. Your mate, or your mother-in-law. The word landed like a blow. Mate. The shattered bond between them, the one neither had dared name, suddenly had shape. Wait. Truth. Selene stared at her mother. Saw the faint recognition in those silver eyes. Saw the exhaustion. Saw the love that had never died. Saw the plea. Don't burn for me. Selene's fire flickered. Indecision tore through her, hot, vicious. Kale lunged forward, half-shifted, claws out. Garrick met him, wolf against wolf, crashing together in a blur of teeth and fury. The circle erupted. Wolves shifting. Elders chanting. Power clashing. Selene stood in the center, flame roaring around her, torn between saving the woman who'd given her life and saving the man who'd just begun to give her hope. Theron raised his voice above the chaos. She cannot have both. The prophecy demands sacrifice. Vera pressed the dagger deeper. Blood trickled, dark against pale skin. Selene screamed. Silver fire exploded outward, not controlled, not beautiful. Raw. Furious. Devastating. It swept the circle in a blinding wave. Stones cracked. Flames died. Wolves yelped, thrown back. But when the light faded, her mother lay still. Throat open. Eyes empty. Vera stood over the body, dagger red. Smiling. You chose. Selene dropped to her knees. The silver fire guttered. Went dark. For the first time in 12 years, she felt truly broken. Kale fought free of Garrick, bloodied, staggering, reached her side. Dropped beside her. Pulled her against him. She didn't fight. Didn't speak. Just stared at the body. At the blood. At the lie that had worn her mother's face until the very end. Theron's voice rang out cold, final. The flame has shown its truth. It destroys. It always destroys. He lifted his hand. The remaining wolves closed in. Kale rose, shielding her. Snarling. Ready to die for her. But Selene lifted her head. Slowly. Eyes burning not with fire. With something colder. Something final. She whispered one word. No. The silver flame didn't return gently. It returned like judgment. It poured from her in a torrent, white-hot, merciless. Not aimed at the wolves. Aimed at the stones themselves. The circle shattered. Ancient rock exploded outward. Power raw, unbound, surged into the sky. A beacon. A warning. A declaration. She rose. Kale beside her. Hand in hers. They turned their backs on the stunned council. On the body that had never been her mother. On the betrayal that had finally burned away every last doubt. They walked out of the broken circle. Into the night. Behind them, the moorland trembled. Ahead lay only darkness. And the revolution that had waited 12 years to be born. The moorland night turned savage after the circle broke. Wind howled across the open ground like 1,000 grieving wolves. Shards of standing stone lay scattered like broken teeth, smoking where silver fire had scorched them black. The bonfire was gone, extinguished in one furious pulse, leaving only a wide circle of ash and the sharp smell of burned earth. Bodies lay motionless among the rubble, some stunned, some bleeding, a few already shifting back to human form with whimpers of pain. Selene stood at the edge of the destruction, bare feet planted on cracked turf. Silver light still clung to her skin in thin, fading threads, like the last embers of a fire too stubborn to die. Kale stayed beside her, chest heaving, blood streaking fresh paths down his arms and ribs. His eyes never left her face. Not the council. Not the fallen. Her. She felt his gaze like a tether. The only thing keeping her from walking straight into the dark and never stopping. Her mother's body, false or not, still lay in the center of the ruined circle. Throat open. Eyes staring at nothing. The sight should have shattered her completely. Instead, it sharpened something inside her. Something cold. Something final. She turned away from the corpse. Looked north. Toward the jagged line of mountains that marked the true borderlands, where no pack claimed dominion, where the first wolves had first breathed life into flame and starlight. She started walking. Kale fell in beside her without a word. They didn't run. They didn't need to. Behind them, the survivors began to stir. Low growls. Curses. The scrape of steel on stone. Theron's voice rose first, hoarse, furious. She cannot be allowed to reach the ancient seat. Vera answered, sharper, colder. Then stop her. Wolves surged forward, dozens now, gray and black and russet shadows flowing across the moor like spilled ink. Kale shifted in mid-stride, massive black wolf tearing free of shredded clothes, roar splitting the night. He planted himself between Selene and the oncoming pack. Fangs bared. Eyes blazing storm gray. Selene didn't stop. She kept walking. One foot in front of the other. Bare soles pressing into cold earth. The silver fire answered, not with rage this time. With certainty. It rose slowly inside her chest, steady, bright, unhurried. She lifted both hands. Not in defense. In declaration. Silver flame erupted outward, not wild, not destructive. Controlled. Beautiful. It formed a shimmering wall between her and the charging wolves 10 feet high, stretching wide as the eye could follow. The flames didn't burn the grass. They didn't scorch the air. They simply were solid, radiant, immovable. The first wave of wolves slammed into it. They rebounded as though hitting stone. Howls of shock and pain filled the night. Selene kept walking. The wall moved with her, flowing forward like a tide of light, pushing the attackers back step by step. Kale circled beside her, wolf form massive, protective, snarling at any who tried to flank. But none could pass. The silver barrier was absolute. She reached the first rise of the foothills. The ground began to slope upward, rocky now, heather giving way to bare stone and lichen. Still she walked. The fire inside her pulsed in time with her heartbeat. Stronger. Clearer. She could feel them now, the ancient presences buried deep in the mountains. Not ghosts. Not memories. The first wolves. Watching. Waiting. She reached a narrow pass between two sheer cliffs. Wind funneled through it, sharp, cold, carrying the scent of snow and old stone. She stopped. Turned. Faced the pack that had followed, halted now at the edge of her shimmering wall. Theron stood at their head, human again, blood on his cloak, eyes wild. "You think this ends here?" he shouted. "You think your little light show changes anything?" Selene's voice carried, soft, clear, cutting through the wind like a blade. "It changes everything." She lifted her arms wide. The silver flame answered in full. It poured from her, not just from her hands. From every inch of her skin. From her eyes. From her open mouth. A torrent of pure silver light, blinding, beautiful, terrifying. The ground trembled. Cracks raced outward from her feet, splitting stone, revealing veins of glowing crystal deep beneath the surface. The mountains answered. A low, resonant hum rose from the rock itself, ancient, patient, approving. Light burst from fissures along the cliffs, silver threads racing upward, illuminating hidden runes carved millennia ago. The past transformed. Stone reshaped. Arched gateways formed where sheer rock had stood moments before. Pillars rose, carved with wolves and flames intertwined. At the far end of the newly revealed path stood a single structure, a temple of black basalt and living crystal, half buried in the mountain, glowing from within like a star trapped in stone. The seat of the first wolves. The heart of the old power. Selene walked toward it. The barrier of flame moved with her, widening, strengthening. Kale shifted back, human again, naked, bloodied, breathing hard. He caught up to her, took her hand. She didn't pull away. Together they stepped through the glowing archway. Behind them, the pack howled in fury and fear. But none crossed the line. They couldn't. The mountains themselves had chosen. Inside the temple the air was warm, impossibly so. Walls of polished basalt reflected silver light in endless patterns. At the center stood a raised dais. On it, a single slab of crystal, clear as water, large enough for two to lie side by side. Runes pulsed along its edges, slow, rhythmic. Selene approached. The fire inside her settled, not dimming, simply resting. She placed both hands on the crystal. It sang. A single, pure note that vibrated through bone and blood. Visions came, not forced, not violent. Gentle. Welcoming. She saw the first wolves not as myth. As people. Laughing around fires. Shifting under moons. Binding their power to the land so no generation would ever stand alone. She saw the betrayal, not just her pack's, but centuries of fear layered upon fear. She saw Kale's father, young, grieving, desperate, choosing the path of chains over trust. She saw Kale, 17, kneeling in blood, swearing a vow he never fully understood until now. She saw herself. Not the broken girl. Not the prisoner. The bridge. The last daughter. The one who could mend, or burn. The vision ended. The crystal went quiet. Selene lifted her head. Tears tracked down her cheeks, not from grief. From clarity. She turned to Kale. He stood a pace away, watching her with something raw and reverent in his eyes. She spoke, voice steady, soft. "I am not your sacrifice." He stepped closer. "I never wanted you to be." She reached out, took both his hands, placed them over her heart, where the silver fire lived. "Feel it." He did. His palms flattened against her chest. The fire answered, warm, bright, welcoming. It flowed into him, not taking, sharing. His breath caught. Eyes widened. He felt it, the bond that had been shattered 12 years ago. Not broken. Waiting. He looked at her, really looked, and whispered the only word that mattered. "Mate." She nodded once. Tears still falling. But smiling now, small, fierce, real. The temple hummed again, approving. The crystal beneath their feet began to glow brighter. Light poured upward through the roof, through the mountain itself, bursting into the night sky like a second dawn. Outside, the pack fell silent. The mountains trembled once gently, then stilled. Selene and Kale stood together, hands joined, hearts aligned. The greater threat had not yet arrived. But it would. The council would regroup. Old allies would become new enemies. The prophecies still demanded storm and flame choose, forge or die. But for the first time, they chose together. Selene leaned forward, pressed her forehead to his, whispered against his lips, "I'm ready." He kissed her slow, deep, claiming, not as king, as equal, as mate, as partner in whatever came next. The silver fire flared around them, beautiful, protective, unbreakable. The revolution wasn't coming. It was already here. And it wore their names. The temple's crystal heart still pulsed beneath their feet, slow now, steady, like the heartbeat of the mountain itself. Silver light leaked from every seam in the basalt walls, painting long, shimmering trails across the floor. The air felt thicker here, warmer, charged with something older than memory. Selene stood in the center of the dais, hands still joined with Kale's, their fingers laced so tightly it hurt in the best way. Neither moved. Neither spoke. The silence between them held everything they hadn't yet said. Outside, the night had gone unnaturally quiet. No wind. No distant howls. Only the faint, far-off rumble of stone settling after the mountain had opened its gates. Inside Selene's chest the silver flame burned low and constant, not raging, not hiding. Simply present. A companion that no longer needed to prove itself. She looked up at Kale. His face was streaked with drying blood, hair wild from shifting and running, eyes the color of storm clouds right before lightning decides to strike. But the fury had left them. In its place was something softer. Something that looked dangerously close to hope. He lifted their joined hands slowly, pressed his lips to her knuckles once, gently, then rested his forehead against hers again. The world narrowed to the space between their breaths. She could feel his heart hammering against her palm where it rested over his chest. She could feel her own answering in the same uneven rhythm. Mate. The words still echoed in her skull, strange and perfect and terrifying all at once. She had spent 12 years believing love was a luxury she couldn't afford. Now it stood in front of her wearing scars and guilt and quiet determination. And she wanted it. Wanted him. Wanted the future they might carve out of the ashes if the world let them. But the world never had. She pulled back just enough to see his eyes. "Do you think we can win this?" Her voice came out small, smaller than she meant it to. Kale didn't answer right away. He searched her face like he was memorizing every line, every shadow. Then he spoke, low, rough, certain. "I think we already have." She blinked. He went on. "Not the war. Not the council. Not the prophecy." He touched her cheek with his thumb, gentle enough to break her. "We've already won the part that matters. You stopped running. I stopped hiding behind a throne. We chose each other. Everything else, we'll burn through it together." A small, broken laugh escaped her. "You make it sound simple. It's not." His mouth curved, just the barest hint of a smile. "But it's honest." She leaned into his touch, closed her eyes, let herself feel the warmth of his palm against her skin. Let herself believe for one fragile heartbeat that maybe they could outrun the storm. Then the crystal beneath them flared once, bright, urgent. A low vibration rolled through the temple floor. Selene's eyes snapped open. Kale tensed beside her. The light in the walls dimmed for a single second, then surged again, brighter, almost blinding. A voice rolled through the chamber, not spoken, not heard with ears. Felt. Deep in the marrow. The bridge has been chosen. Storm and flame stand together. But the shadow is not finished. It gathers strength beyond the northern peaks. It wears old faces. It carries old oaths. It will come for the heart of power. It will demand one last sacrifice. The light pulsed once more, then steadied. Silence returned. Heavier now. Selene felt the words settle into her like cold iron. Kale's grip on her hand tightened. She looked at him, saw the same understanding in his eyes. The prophecy wasn't finished with them. It had only just begun. She swallowed, voice barely above a whisper. What if the sacrifice is one of us? Kale didn't flinch. He pulled her closer, arms wrapping around her, strong and sure. Then we make sure it isn't. Simple. Fierce. A vow. She buried her face against his shoulder, breathed in cedar smoke and blood in him. And for the first time since the massacre, she let herself feel something bigger than survival. Hope. Fragile. Fierce. Real. She lifted her head, met his gaze, and asked the only question that mattered now. Will you choose me, even if the world demands I burn? Kale's answer came without hesitation. I already did. He kissed her then, slow, deep, claiming. Not a goodbye. A beginning. The temple light flared around them, silver and warm, wrapping them like wings. Outside, the first distant howl rose, not warning this time. Answer. The pack was coming. The council was coming. The shadow beyond the peaks was coming. But inside the heart of the mountain, two souls stood bound by flame and storm. Not broken. Not alone. Together. And whatever came next, they would face it. Side by side. Fire in her veins. Storm in his eyes. One last question hung in the silence between heartbeats. Would you have chosen her? Or feared her too? Would you have stood beside the girl who carried flame enough to reshape kingdoms? Or would you have reached for the chains? Is she a savior? Or just a girl cursed with too much fire? The answer lives in you now. If this story has set something alight inside your chest, if the thought of silver chains breaking, of a king choosing love over law, of a girl finally claiming the power she was told would destroy her, if any of it made your pulse race or your eyes burn, then stay. Subscribe to Emmy Romance Collections. Because here, we don't just tell tales. We let them burn. And the next one is already kindling.